I'm excited to introduce Joe Yakul. He's the CEO of Within, and they also own Breakfast.io. And then Colin Burks is the Senior Manager of Acquisition Marketing at Mack Weldon. And they actually, Colin used to work for Joe, so that's how they got pulled together, which is great. But in this session, you're going to learn about how Mack Weldon partnered with Breakfast.io to turn user-generated content into full funnel engine, producing high-volume results. So come on board.
A lot of good content for all of you today. Pun intended, beyond the briefs. So we're going to be hearing about the briefs from Colin. But I'm Joe Yakwell, founder and CEO of Breakfast.io, and we create UGC that actually performs, used across paid social, but also in retail media, PDPs, and in other kind of owned and operated channels. Colin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Colin Burke. I work at Mack Weldon. I run up new customer acquisition on e-com.
Awesome. So just to tell you a little bit about Breakfast and a little bit about Mack Weldon. So at Breakfast, we help brands create hundreds of video ads at scale. We help them do that in a way that's really fast, really cost efficient, and highly performant. We'll talk a little bit about the process in which that works and how it actually drives results. Can you tell us a little bit about the brand for Mack Weldon?
Yeah, so Mack Weldon has been around since 2012. Started as just men's basics, underwear, undershirts. And now we have kind of slowly up-leveled our product offering to basically anything that a man can wear.
Awesome. So let's jump into it. To kick it off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about why UGC was a priority for you? You've been running marketing there for a little while. Mack Weldon's been around for years now. What kind of drove the prioritization of UGC as a content lever?
Yeah, I think one of the common themes throughout this whole conference has been authenticity through our content. And running a brand that's towards the top of the market in terms of price point, it is imperative to kind of tell that brand story and tell that product story in a way that's going to connect with the end user. And knowing, through past tests that UGC does perform, we just didn't have a lot of it. It was an area that we really want to expand in 2025.
And I think UGC as a term is just really broad. You hear UGC, you hear creators, you hear influencers, and people kind of mesh that all together. At Breakfast, we're really talking about content creators that we see as separate and apart from influencers. How does Mack Weldon think about the difference between the two, and why are you looking to work with creators versus working with influencers?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with working with influencers really came down to just cost. We're trying to build a lot of content, learn what works, and then scale on that quickly. And in order to kind of speed up that product or that positive feedback loop, we needed to create this content at scale. And when working with influencers, they're used to monetizing their reach, but that's not necessarily what we're trying to do through this. We're using our own brand reach and using their content. So when you kind of break down the unit economics of just one video, it's much cheaper to go with a content creator over an influencer.
Right, so avoid paying the premium for the fact that they have this audience and the time-consuming nature of that cost, and creators being a more efficient way to do that. And then when it comes to UGC, there's a lot of ways to do that. A lot of brands try to activate their customers to create UGC. There's many different platforms out there. Why did you choose Breakfast?
Yeah, when evaluating the potential solutions to our problem of not having enough UGC, we had a scorecard that really had kind of four main pieces that we were grading people on, which was quality, speed, volume, and price. And it just felt like every vendor that we talked to was missing one of those pieces. But with Breakfast, we were kind of able to hit all four and hit the ground running almost immediately.
Awesome. So this is kind of the typical setup that we see when we work with clients, right? They're not very diversified, both in terms of platform and also even in terms of content. Oftentimes we hear people come to us and say things like, this ad has been running for the last 6 months. We can't get away from it, but it just continues to be a top performing ad. And they just don't want to continue serving it, even though it does drive that performance. So how do you create better performance on these platforms and create fresh content that's going to avoid that fatigue? And that's where this content as a solution comes into play, right? This volume and variety where we can use creative as the new targeting, right? Where Meta used to be about all these granular audiences and a million different lookalikes and interest audiences, where now if you can create a high volume of content with a lot of variety, you can let the platforms find and unlock these new audiences for you, using that creative to find those audiences and really doing all of that in a way that's maximizing customer acquisition or maximizing revenue. And that's exactly why people come to Breakfast. And this is just some of the creators that Colin's team selected. What was that process like, and why did you choose this type of demo for your creators?
Yeah, so we were really trying to find creators who lined up with our target audience. So that younger professional, kind of heading back to the office, needs a new wardrobe to wear every day. And in looking at creators, we wanted to make sure that they could connect emotionally with the people behind the phone scrolling through their IG feed or TikTok feed right off the bat. So that way they'd be way more engaged with the videos and spend more time kind of just learning about our product offering. Breakfast made it very easy. They have a huge depth of creator pool. So kind of narrowing it down to our target audience still left us a wide variety of creators to potentially work with.
Yeah, this was an easy one. We get lots of weird, funky asks about creators. So we have a network of about over 5,000. A lot of them also go into physical store. So people who are located around a Kroger or a Target or a Walmart. So the ability to drive creators into store for activations in addition for online, like we did with Mack Weldon, are just different examples of ways that people leverage our creators across the country and even in other countries as well. So this is what the content came out like, right? The content is made to look authentic, as Colin was saying, right? I think Colin might be the next high-performing creator for Mack Weldon. We'll see. Actually, a lot of our employees became creators and are top-performing creators because really anybody can become a content creator. And as you could see from these ads, right, of course they look authentic. That's the whole point. These are content creators that are making them, and they're not supposed to be super, super polished. But at the same time, you do see some commonalities across these ads in ways that make them on brand for Mack Weldon, right? We work really closely with brands to take their brand guidelines and turn them into what we call creator guidelines, right? How do we loosen up those brand guidelines and take things away from it that do make sense for studio content but don't make sense for creator content, so that the results still have uniformity in ways that match up with the brand ethos and the brand vibe, but don't stray away from the authenticity of that individual creator and their approach to how they make content and how they resonate with their audience. One of the other things that we do, of course, we have to talk about AI. We are a very human-first platform in terms of the uniqueness of the content generation, but we also use AI for additional variation. Most of the AI that we use is for iteration on content that's submitted from our creators, but we've also been toying around with AI to create content from scratch as well. We're gonna take a quick show of hands. If you think the ad on the left is AI, raise your hand. Don't be shy, don't be shy. Okay, I see a couple. If you think the ad on the right is AI, raise your hand. Okay, a few more. So you guys are catching on. That ad on the right is AI. This one was fully AI generated, which is less often what we create. More of the AI content that we create, like I said, are mashups of content that we get from our creators, so that we could take high-performing winners and create more versions of those. In this particular case, they were up in a pinch. Do you want to just give a little context to this one?
Yeah, we basically had a sale dropped on us. 24 hours, the sale's going live.
This doesn't happen to any of your brands, but it only happens to Mack Weldon.
And I reached out to Kat, our account manager, and said, I know you were talking about AI creators. Like, is there any way we get something live tomorrow? And we worked, collaborated on a script and ended up launching the AI creator, and it performed really well during the course of the sale.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily the use case for every moment, but when you're up in a pinch, it can be used in this way, which is a little bit different. But we're constantly toying around with new ideas and how we can leverage AI to create high-performing content. So we're going to talk a little bit about the results of the program, starting out with the asset delivery. Can you just talk them through kind of the timeline from when you first started working with Breakfast and kind of how that iteration happened and how that content generation happened?
Yeah, so we kicked off our partnership in February. And each month we do 3 different briefs. So those briefs, are different in terms of the products that we select and kind of the
seasonality.
Yeah, exactly. In each brief, we select 10 creators, and they create 5 ads, 4 videos and 1 image. So 3 times a month, we're getting 50 ads to test out into our breakfast campaign. And as we created more briefs, got more ads into the platform, you find more and more winners. Those winners become better and better and harder to knock off. As we've launched, we just have now kind of a much wider depth of winners. And everything has kind of just been up and to the right over the past few weeks.
Yeah, the first brief is always the trickiest, right? Because that's where you have a bunch of these gotcha moments, right? Where creators are creating content against your brief and you're realizing that there are certain things that were made that you didn't want, right? That's how the brief gets refined. And that very next brief, we find even in the second brief that the approval rate on the content submitted gets well over 90%. So we get the kinks out there, and then as Colin mentioned, iteration on top performers allows us to consistently find new winners. But it is a game of volume and variety, right? And as we show here, right, we launched over 400 ads. We're not expecting them all to become winners, actually quite the contrary. We find that only 2% of ads become top performers, and that 2% of ads get 80% of the spend, right? So just think about that for a second. How many people in this room are making under 20 ads a month? Raise your hand. Cool. How many are making over 20 ads a month? All right, over 50? All right, like 2, 3 hands. Over 100 ads a month? 1, okay? So if you make over 100 ads a month, you're very likely to find a winner every month. If you're making 30 ads a month, 40 ads a month, 50 ads a month, very unlikely that you're going to find a winner every month. So if you find yourself in this position where your ads aren't driving the performance you want, or you're stuck with the same ad from a while ago that's still your top performer, this is why, right? It's not because of some weird history that's baked in. I hear a lot of stories of oh, this ad just has so much spend and so much history, that's why we can't beat it. That's really not true. When you launch a better performing ad, it will beat your top performer within 1 or 2 days, regardless of how much spend or history is behind that ad. That's a myth. So the issue is that you're not finding better winning ads, and it's because it's hard to find, right? If only 2% of ads become top performers, you have to do that many ad variations to find those winners. So can you just talk a little bit about how that resulted in revenue improvement for you?
Yeah. So the goal for this year was to get more new customers and drive better efficiency, which is, I feel like, a classic performance marketing goal.
It's what every marketer wants to hear. More volume, cheaper cost to acquire.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, really, we kicked off the campaign, and within, I would say, about 3 or 4 briefs, we found our first few winners. And over, I think this is the past 60 days, we've been able to spend more on Meta and more efficiently. And a big part of that is just the content generation through our breakfast campaigns.
Yeah, one of the other things that's really interesting that I think is kind of on the side of these results is that we've ran tests for clients who also wanted to understand the incrementality of our content relative to the incrementality of the other content that they had. So it's a different question, right? It's not just can I find ads that perform better than the other ads in platform, but is it actually showing up in a different way in terms of that revenue being either more new to file or more incremental? So we had actually several clients run this test in a very clean A/B, and we're finding also that the incrementality on UGC is much higher than non-UGC content, which again does make sense when you think about the kind of people that resonate with it. Because it's more authentic and it's more engaging, it performs even better for people who are higher up in the funnel than non-UGC content does. Non-UGC content can do a really good job of converting people who are already in your funnel if you're just driving a promo ad in an image, for example. But getting people to come into your funnel for the first time is much more efficient to do with authentic content and video content. So we're finding that in addition to just straight up performance improvement in platform, we're also finding when people are using tools like Measured or House or Lift Lab that they're seeing higher incrementality on UGC content as well. And these results are not unique to Mack Weldon. They're more so are unique to this approach of high volume and high variety and authenticity. And we see lift across the board of many different types of clients and different types of audiences. As you can see on the screen, logos that you all might know, but different types of brands and businesses that all have similar impact when they start driving this type of volume and variety into their content mix. So to kind of round things out before we open up for questions, these are our commerce next steps. First is volume. Remember the 2% rule, right? How much content are you making and what is your expectation from that content? Don't let that be out of line with the math, right? 2% of ads become top performers. If you're making 10 ads a month, you're going to sit around waiting somewhere between 5 and 10 months to find a winning ad, right? So make sure you're creating enough volume, make sure you're creating enough variety. Variety means, where does this content come from? What does it look like, right? If you look at your content and you say that you have variety and it's because you're using different background colors, right? That's not true variety. True variety is you're using influencers, you're using branded content, you're using UGC content, unboxing videos, testimonials, reviews, press quotes, right? Really have a true breadth of variety in your ad account so that you can crack into different audiences or different people in the funnel at different stages. And lastly, authenticity, right? So 27% lift in incrementality alone on UGC ads. So even if they drive the same in-platform ROAS, you're already getting a 27% lift on incrementality. In addition to that, you can drive platform lifts. If you combine the platform lift with the incremental lift, there's huge gains to be had with this approach of volume and variety and authenticity and really improving your ad account performance through creative. We see oftentimes brands are struggling to fund creative. One of the things that we also see brands doing really successfully is shifting even just a couple percentage points of working media into content generation. Whether you do it with breakfast or not doesn't matter, just in terms of where you're spending your money between media and content. Don't try to minimize your creative investment while maximizing your media investment if you're not letting that media dollar work harder for you. So make sure your media dollars are working hard by feeding it enough of that content. And we're also giving out some free UGC. Feel free to scan that QR code, and you could submit to qualify. We also have a booth on the 3rd floor if you want to see some of the breakfast folks. They're also, some of them are walking around in pink sweatshirts, like you see Kat here over here. Anyways, we'll open up for questions. We do have a couple minutes left for questions if anyone has any. So we'll take them. Yeah, go ahead. The only lady in the room with 100 ads a month. What's up?
When it comes to the influencer partnerships and content that you do have, are you trying to utilize those at all as UGC, or are you just strictly saying, okay, those influencer posts go live and I'm only trying to use the breakfast IO content in actual paid ads?
Yeah, so we own 2 businesses. We have an agency business, which also has an influencer service, which is called Within, and then we also have breakfast.io, which is our UGC platform. So I'll answer that as from the agency perspective, because it's more broad, where we work with breakfast and influencers together. If you think about what I was just saying a second ago on variety, right? It's about where the content comes from, and you should be using all of it. So I always advise brands that if you're going to pay an influencer for their content, make sure that you have the usage rights to put paid media behind it, but also to leverage their handle. So we do that all the time, and there's no reason why you shouldn't do that or you should avoid do that. It's not which one's better, right? It's how can you maximize your impact by leveraging both. So inside of breakfast, we actually have a whole swath of creators that have enabled whitelisting. Not all of them will do that, because some of them don't have a handle that they want to be kind of promoted, but many of them do, and that's something that they opt into. So for some brands who want to leverage that whitelisting, we have that capability. Breakfast also happens to own and operate many handles across all industries, and we do that on purpose because we just find, again, it's another way to increase the variety and the content mix. And sometimes we find that running ads on third-party handles perform better than brand handles, even if it's not the creator's handle. So we do kind of all of those things, and those are just more examples of iteration.
Love you guys, and what a great presentation. Thanks. So question for you, a couple questions, 10 questions, no. How much of the lift that you see from your breakfast model depends on what your baseline is of the existing ads that are running in terms of how much have they been tested? What are the models that they've used to try to optimize the existing ads? What are you seeing across your different clients? As far as the sophistication that they're coming to the table with versus none.
Yeah, it's really a function of how much volume and variety is in the account already, right? The less volume in the account, the less variety in the account, the bigger of an impact you're going to see right out of the gate. I don't really think there's such an upper limit of how much content that an account can handle. Again, like another thing that we've just find to be a myth. Like the cap is really on how much money you're willing to invest in creative relative to your media budget. Like that does make sense. But how many ads you can test is not a thing. Like your ad platform can test as many ads as you can put in there. We can test through hundreds of ads with a very small budget. So on average, our clients are spending about $1,000 to $2,000 a month on ad testing, and they're testing between 1 and 500 ads a month with that budget. And it's because the signal to noise on that is so good where it's very clear out of 200 ads we tested that these 5 are the ones worth graduating into all the other main campaigns that are live in the account and out of testing. And the other 195, we're just gonna let die out. So that's kind of how it works.
And do you ever take, like my existing ads that I would run if I never knew you and throw them into your test platform to see, if they're outperformed, and assume you would tell me the truth?
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to test it. That's one way to test it. So we have some clients who want to actually put their ads in the testing campaign with our ads. We have other clients who don't want to kind of mess around with the testing campaign. They want to see it clean with just our ads. The reason why we don't really care is because in the end of the day, like none of us are telling Meta how much money to spend on one ad versus the other that inside of the same ad set. Mm-hmm. And we know that once all the ads are in the main campaign and actually live with real budgets for scale, that the best performing ads are going to get the budget. So whether you test it one way or the other, once they go into the main campaigns with the real budget behind it, the ads that perform will get the spend and the ones that don't won't. Going back to that kind of, 2% of ads get 80% of the spend rule.
And so one more question, if that's
Sure.
okay. So the whole content development using AI, sometimes the AI people, they look like a Ken doll. You know what I mean? Like there's something about it that just screams, this is AI. And that'll get better over time. But I'm just curious, in the current environment, have you actually taken your winning ads from the traditional, content creator breakfast model, and found your winners, run them, had the lift that you've had, and then produce more ads based on those winners using AI? And if so, how do you prompt to say, these are the reasons these ads won?
Yeah.
So make more like them. Like that's the nuance of how, when you reproduce a winning ad using AI, can you like dial into that nuance so that somehow the AI can figure out like why it won?
Sure. So I'm going to answer this quickly because we're out of time. But basically, it's rare that we're creating content from scratch with AI, like the example I showed. I wanted to show that example just so you could see what is possible when you really need it in a pinch, like what Colin was describing. But otherwise, most of the AI that we're leveraging is exactly what you just described. We take winning ads, multiple of them. We use AI to either create iterations of each of them individually with new text overlays, different voice overs, different editing, but also we'll mash up several different winning ads together into completely new iterated ads that were a combination of those different winning ads all together and blend them together in a way that still is like logical and makes sense. And many of our top performing ads for our clients are ones that had AI layered on top after the initial winner won. So that's like the much more common use case. And then you avoid that kind of weird uncanny valley of like, is that real, is it not? Because it is real. The AI is more so doing editing and text overlay and mashup, not necessarily creating a net new visual that wasn't there before.
Super interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.